Hello and welcome to episode 50 of the Alnwick Castle Podcast. I'm Deborah Beecroft.
And I'm Daniel Watkins.
And we're marking our 50th episode by answering some of your Alnwick Castle questions.
We've taken a selection of 10 things people wanted to know more about, from a range of popular castle-related subjects. Keep listening to hear the questions and our answers, and please enjoy.
Our first question is, how old is the castle?
I always say that this is the most difficult question that people can ask because it depends which bit of the castle you're looking at. There are parts that we know go back to the 12th century. If you listen to one of our very first episodes, we talk about a record from 1138 that describes there being a heavily fortified castle on the same spot as the modern Alnwick Castle. So if you look in certain areas, you've got stones from the 1100s. Then there was a big rebuilding in the 1300s, so you've got a load of areas from there. Then you've got a restoration in the 1700s, and it gets newer and less old. And then you get more restoration in the 1800s, and there's a lot of wall work and tower work from the Victorian period. We were looking at some plans in the archive recently that showed just how different the castle in the 1800s might have looked from how it is now. And there's a lot of stone from the 1800s currently, but there could have been a whole lot more. They were planning to almost completely rebuild the place. And then if you've been and visited in the past 20 years or so, you've probably seen scaffolding around one bit of wall, one bit of tower, one bit of battlement. And when stones are weathered or eroded or they need repairs, they get replaced. So you've got stones that are 10 years old and 20 years old, in amongst the ones that are 700 years old and 300 years old, and it all gets very confusing. So what we tend to prefer to say is that the castle has been here for around 900 years or so. But in terms of how old it is, we can face you in any direction and it'll be a different answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's a way of saying we don't know is essentially the answer, isn't it?
Yeah. It's lots of ages at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So question number 1 answered, I think.
Well done.
Yeah.
As close as you can get, to be fair.
Okay, yeah, I'll take that. So my first question for you, which parts of the castle were used for the Harry Potter films?
So Harry Potter filmed here for 2 films, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone and Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Majority comes from the first film, and there are various areas of the castle that we used for that filming. We start with the Lion Arch. So as you were heading into Alnwick Castle from the Alnwick Garden area, was used during the first film as the entrance to Hogwarts, but also as the way the children, so Hermione, Ron, Harry and Draco, walk down with the caretaker Filch towards their first detention lesson in the very dark, and it would lead you towards the path towards the Forbidden Forest.
But not all the way in.
But not all the way in, because you would have to go to...
I think Buckinghamshire.
Yeah, I think Buckinghamshire for the actual
forest
itself.
Yeah.
But close enough. Long journey. The same stretch of path was used when the 3 main children found out all about the Philosopher's Stone from Hagrid, as he unintentionally revealed all the secrets. We move through into the main castle walls. Most visitors walk through the castle walls, but if you were Harry and Ron, you would have flown over the castle walls in the Ford Angler for the second film, straight into the Whomping Willow.
Yep.
And that is on the Inner Bailey as you come in through Lion Arch, just to the right. The path leading up towards the main keep, you may have seen Hagrid pulling the Christmas tree through for the first film.
Yes.
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 Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, this is our Christmas episode.
Oh, okay, that's nice then, yeah. This is just me as I'm kind of walking through the castle as opposed to chronologically order.
Yes.
And if you were walking through towards the stateroom entrance, into the small inner courtyard, you will also have seen that in the first film as well. After their first charms lesson, when the boys are being a little bit mean about Hermione, that she's a bit of a know-it-all, and she hears them, that scene was filmed in that small courtyard area as the boys walk through some of the archways. The main scene that was filmed at Alnwick Castle that most people recognise was in fact the first broomstick lesson that the children did in Hogwarts. The actors were lined up against the Outer Bailey with Madam Hooch walking through the middle as they learned how to pick up their broomstick. And when Neville's went a little bit wrong. He ended up on top of the barbican on a statue that wasn't one of our statues, but luckily matched the statues that were already there, that had been there since the 1700s. Yes. So it quite nicely.
Yes. And I think you've just answered the first part of our next question, which is about statues.
Unintentionally, but I did.
Yeah.
Okay. The next question is, what are all the statues around the top of the castle?
Okay, well, not put there for the Harry Potter films. We know that.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the 1700s. That's where a lot of them came from. It's one of those restorations of the castle, and this is down to the first Duchess of Northumberland, who was one of the focuses, again, of one of our early episodes of the podcast. She had ideas based on Gothic novels she'd read and ideas of her past and her family's past in Northumberland, and she wanted to recreate something that felt like a castle. Whether it was accurate to a real castle or not almost didn't matter, but she got a local stonemason called James Johnson from Stamfordham in Northumberland to make about 100 stone statues, and they went on tops of the walls, and they covered the tops of the walls.
They do, but there are a variety of different designs for them.
There are. I have seen Romans up there. There are cavaliers. There are monks. I think there's a Viking somewhere. There are knights. There are all kinds of different little figures doing their poses, making the castle look populated. And we've got some very early photos of the castle from the early 1800s, and you can see that the walls were just covered in these statues. From about 100, there are maybe 30 or so left. A lot of them disappeared during the 19th and 20th centuries.
But they're not the only statues.
They are not the only statues. There are some statues on top of the two gatehouse towers that guard the entrance to the main keep, and they probably go back to the middle of the 1300s. So they are authentic medieval statues. We don't know what they were there for. Some historians, if you ask them, will say that these statues were put up for defensive purposes to try and put off attackers. Other people think they're more decorative. Some people think they're just there to complement the shields that are also around the tops of those two towers. There are not many other castles in Britain that have statues like this from this period. Our archivist Chris has tracked some down to Hilton Castle near Sunderland, but that's more or less it. So they're quite rare and they're quite special. They're a lot more worn down and eroded than the first Duchess's statues. But while they might have had a practical purpose, hers did not. They were just there for the style, just there for the look.
Mm-hmm. And if you did want to see them close up, there are some that are actually on the ground.
They are. They're ones who have been taken down from the walls, or they've been away from the castle and they've come back. I remember going way, way back in the castle's history to 2016 when Pokemon Go was a massive thing. One of those statues was a Pokestop in Pokemon Go. So he was known as the half-buried soldier via this game. We had never called him that, but that is the name that stuck because of Pokemon Go.
And to be fair, that is almost how he looks.
Yes, he only has his top half left. His little stone legs have gone. But yeah, you can see him close up. You can see the details that went into all 100 of these little stone men that went around the tops of the castle at one point. And when you watch something like Harry Potter and you see more, it's quite easy to imagine what it would have looked like when they were just everywhere. Mm-hmm. So we go from outside the castle, we're going inside the castle for the next question. And the question is, what is the best room in the castle? So that's one for you. What's the best room, or what's your favourite room in the castle? And we'll call that the best.
That is a tricky one, because they are all, particularly the main staterooms, they are all stunning in their own different ways. Personally, though, I think the library is the best room in the castle. It's partly because a dream of mine is to have a room with 14,000 books just standing and sitting there forever. But you have this stunning library of 14,000 books. There's a nice warmth to it because most of the bindings are golds and reds and those sort of colours. It's a beautiful room. It's huge, but you don't notice the size of it when you're standing in there because you've got the warmth of the books, and it does sort of make it feel a lot more homely, which does help that it is the main sitting room of the family. So you have their personal touches as well, which really sort of gives it this nice feeling when you're in the library. It also has my second favourite ceiling.
Second favourite ceiling, okay.
First is the dining rooms.
Yep.
Because it is a bit more personalised to the 4th Duke who had the room designed. So there's a lot more history into that room and that ceiling than it feels through the rest of the castle as well.
Yeah, it's a room that gives you a story to it from the top down
all
to
the way
the bottom
down.
shelves.
Yeah, yes.
Have you had much chance to see any of the books?
I have seen a few for different reasons, whether it's because the archives had them out and we've been able to have a quick sneak peek, or when the team are cleaning them, occasionally we get a little sneak peek, but not as many as I'd like.
No. But I once calculated that if you read one book from the castle library every day, you're getting on for nearly 40 years before you would have read them all.
And you'd have to know many languages to do that.
You'd have to know a lot of languages. They are not all books in English. Some of them go back quite a long way in terms of when they were first printed as well.
Yep. And there's a nice variety of subjects. So if you were allowed and you were very interested, you could go through history, politics, nature, geography, history, science, novels, poems.
Bit of everything. It's a good library.
It is a good library. Yeah. So yes, that's probably my favourite. But it does only have the second best ceiling.
Yeah, I would agree with both those things.
Thank you. Going back to the castle as a castle, was it ever conquered?
This is going to be another one of those long answers that basically says maybe.
Okay.
It has changed owners a lot of times. It's been surrendered, kind of to avoid being conquered. It's been bought.
Yep.
It's been inherited. It's been besieged. It's been given.
Yep.
But as far as we know, there's never been a case where an army has come charging up to the castle gates, stormed the Barbican, broken in through the walls, killed everyone inside, and said, "This is ours now."
Yeah.
That's happened a lot to a lot of other castles around Northumberland. Alnwick has somehow always avoided that sort of thing. Over the next year, both if you visit the castle and if you listen to the podcast, you're probably going to get quite a lot of Wars of the Roses content. And that's the period where the castle gets as close as it's ever been to being conquered in the traditional use of the word.
Yes, because it did change hands a few times during the Wars of the Roses.
I think 5 in a couple of years. Yeah. It's tricky to keep track. We are going to attempt to do that for you in a future episode. Sorry. But that's a case of an army arriving outside, ready to conquer it, and whoever is looking after the castle from the inside, realising to keep themselves alive, to keep the castle standing, and to keep everyone else alive, it's easier to surrender, let the invaders in, escape with your life, and then within 6 months it's probably going to be back with you anyway, which is what tended to happen.
Yeah.
So if you're a clever castle, you can more or less avoid any kind of conquering like that. If you let the invaders in, you can regroup and try and take it back. Yeah. It's not to say people didn't try, but as far as we know, never been conquered.
Works.
That seems fair.
Yeah.
So my next question, it's more of your favourite things, more of the best things. So you mentioned your best ceiling, your best room.
Yep.
But if we go into a little more detail, what are your favourite items? What are your favourite objects? We've had episodes about caring for the castle's collections in the past. You can go back and listen to those. But if you had favourites, if you had particular paintings or objects, what are you picking?
I would say that my favourite piece of furniture is the table known as the 5 Senses table. It is a large table that is usually in the drawing room, which is a marquetry table which has got up to 16, 20 different types of wood made into the pattern. You have the 5 senses depicted, hence the name. And as well as that, there are a huge amount of mythical creatures, animals, other figures, cherubs, just general patterns within it. And it took 11 years to make. And the reason I like that one more than a lot of the other pieces in the collection is, yes, it wouldn't fit in my house, but it doesn't look out of place in a big stately home, but I also think it would be quite easy to use that in a normal house as well. It's ornate, but it's not over the top ornate.
Yes.
It doesn't feel out of place to most people because it is a nice just wooden table with a nice story behind it.
It's not covered in gilding and gold or anything like that.
No. And it is competing against two of the big cabinets, which we are going to be talking about in a future episode, possibly.
We are.
Yes.
If you look out to the podcast feed in the future, you'll see an episode dedicated to these two cabinets where we'll go into a lot more detail about what they are and what they mean.
Yeah, and as the possibly two most important pieces of the collection, the fact that this table works well enough in that room and isn't totally overshadowed by them, I think is quite nice.
Yeah.
And in terms of paintings, again, it's difficult. I prefer, when I'm thinking about the paintings, to talk about them in terms of the history of them rather than the actual technique. But my favourite painting is probably the Canaletto of Westminster Bridge, looking through the arch with the bucket.
Yes.
So you are looking through one of the arches of the original Bridge of Westminster, and the bridge itself, you have a small bucket hanging down from it, and then behind that you have London as was in the 1700s. So there aren't many buildings still standing from that view, but it is the colour that's in that, it's the detail in that, and I think compared to other landscapes, either by Canaletto that surround that or within the collection itself, it's quite unique, and it's quite eye-catching, and that's probably why I like that one the most.
And it does have a bucket in it that's hanging from the bridge.
Yeah, so it's an easy thing to spot, but I think it's striking, and the colours are striking, and I think that's why I like it the most. And again, it's in a room that's surrounded by a huge amount of artwork, but that one stands out, I think.
And that one is in the upper guard chamber of the staterooms.
Yes.
I think probably my favourite painting to talk about for the history of it, and maybe a little bit the artistic technique as well, is The Visitation.
Yes.
Which is in the Anti-Library. And it's 3 fragments of a fresco painting.
Yeah, so The Visitation is a scene from the Virgin Mary's life when she is pregnant with Jesus, going to her cousin Elizabeth, who was pregnant with John the Baptist at the time. In the scene, you have the 2 women centre of the painting. Surrounding them are ladies, handmaids possibly, villagers. You have Zachariah, Elizabeth's husband, talking to a man in the corner. But as a fresco, it was never finished, so Zachariah does not have a hand, and he's talking to a head with no body.
And that's kind of what I like about it, the fact that the artist, Sebastiano del Piombo, to give him his full name, died before he could finish this fresco, which was supposed to be on the wall of a church in Rome. So it's huge in terms of scale. But when the scaffold was taken down after his death, parts of it were not finished. And it stayed that way for a little bit, and then it was removed from the wall of the church. It was taken out of its original home. And by the time it got to Alnwick Castle, maybe 300 years after he painted it in the mid-1500s, there's only these 3 little sections of it that are left. But it would have been absolutely huge. It would have covered a church wall. So you can look at it and imagine the size and the scale of this finished project. And knowing what we know about Sebastiano as an artist and how he's been perceived makes me like it a little bit more as well. You might have seen these pictures if you went to an exhibition in London called Sebastiano and Michelangelo. And Michelangelo, very, very famous as far as artists go. He's one of the people on your second favourite ceiling, he is mentioned.
He is.
And he and Sebastiano were really good friends for most of their lives. They had a falling out about the painting of the Sistine Chapel. And Michelangelo started to tell everybody who would listen that Sebastiano was no good as an artist. And that is the view that art history took. It took Michelangelo's side, and Sebastiano was no longer on the same level as him. So you're looking at this picture, and I kind of see it as a little bit of an underdog. That this person has been overshadowed by his much more famous friend, and you get to talk about him and show him to people who then maybe look out for him next time they go to an art gallery or something.
And it is, again, it's a painting in a room surrounded by Titians and other Renaissance artwork, and the size of it helps, but it's another one that stands out.
Yeah.
Even if it's just sort of had to have a second look, because it does look a bit strange, because it's not quite in. Everything's a little bit too big in terms of fingers, facial expressions, but that you can imagine that if it was on a huge wall of a church, why everything's a little bit out of proportion.
It's got such a good story behind it. It's probably my favourite at the moment, but ask me again in a week, it'll have changed.
Nice. Yeah. So I'm asking you all the outside building questions.
Okay.
How long was the castle a ruin?
Kind of never, but kind of a while. I'm giving you all of the vague answers here. There was a period from the 1600s where the Percy family were not at the castle.
Mm-hmm.
One of our favourite people to talk about on the podcast over the past 50 episodes has been the wizard, Earl of Northumberland.
Yes, who might get mentioned
in
soon.
the future question, mighty. Yeah. We've got the questions in front of us. We know what's coming up. He was the last of the Percy Earls of Northumberland to be born in Northumberland. But for most of his life, he didn't really live here. Mm-hmm. He put his cousin Thomas, star of Treason the Musical, in charge of Alnwick Castle, and Thomas kind of looked after it. Then Thomas was killed escaping the gunpowder plot, and the Earl was locked up in the Tower of London, confined to his southern estates afterwards, and nobody really used the castle anymore. In the next episode 51 coming out early next year, you'll hear about a little bit of use by the castle in 1650 for housing prisoners. And that was about it for nearly 100 years. It was never a ruin, but it was as close to ruined as it has ever been. The walls were not in good condition. Mm-hmm. The rooms were not habitable enough for people to live in. There was nobody really working there. The lead had been taken off the roof. It needed a huge amount of work done to it to turn it into a castle that you could use again. And that is what the first Duke and Duchess of Northumberland did in the 1750s, nearly 100 years after the last major use of the castle. So you've got nearly a century where you could say it's almost ruined, but in terms of entire walls falling down, towers crumbling into dust, it never quite got as bad as that.
No, and it wouldn't have been able to if the fact that they were able to move back into it suggests that it couldn't have been too bad, because they wouldn't have rebuilt a full castle.
There is a story that they had a choice between Alnwick Castle and Warkworth Castle, about 8 miles south of here, and picked Alnwick because it was bigger.
Yeah.
How true that is, I'm not sure, but we know that they did use a wooden building called the Exchequer House that stood in the Outer Bailey on the site of the Harry Potter filming for the broomstick lesson while the castle was being worked on. So for a while at least, it wasn't quite up to their standards.
No.
But in terms of a ruin, probably when you imagine a castle ruin, it never quite got that bad.
Possibly on its way to becoming one had they not decided to...
Yeah. Leave it another 100 years.
Yeah.
And it's probably there.
Yeah.
So kind of, but never.
It's a lot of your answers.
I know it is a lot of my answers. I've got one more question for you, I think. We've kind of hinted at it. Who's the most interesting person who's lived at the castle?
So I would have said the Wizard Earl, so the 9th Earl of Northumberland, because he was just a fascinating man. He had his own lab in the Tower of London. He did experiments. He talked with the big thinkers of the day. And he was just an interesting character, not just because of who his cousin was, who happened to be part of the gunpowder plot, but because he was such a unique person of the time. He wasn't interested in the politics and the religious tensions particularly. He had his own interests and did his own experiments. And
we've been researching him quite a bit recently.
Yes.
And everything we find, there's always something new and extra where you go, oh, he did that as well.
Yes, yes.
I saw last week that he had the largest non-royal stables in Europe in the early 1600s.
Mm-hmm. And for somebody who was in the Tower of London for most of that period of time, you wonder what he did with them or why.
Yeah, and he created a horse track to ride within the Tower of London.
Yeah.
So even while he was in prison, he could ride one of his 130 horses.
Exactly.
And he lived next door to Shakespeare.
Yes, we did.
It's just all these things just keep coming
Yes.
out. Even lists that have survived of his clothes
Yes.
and the different coloured hats and caps that he used to wear.
Pink stockings and
Yeah.
yes. I imagine he was quite a character of the time.
He's a good pick.
He's a good pick. I'd possibly also mention the first Duchess of Northumberland, because she seemed to have huge influence both with Alnwick Castle but also in court. She was one of the highest ladies of the court. She was the Percy heiress, so she had all the history behind her and she made sure that you knew that. So she gets a bit of an honorary mention. And probably Harry Hotspur as well, just because he's a bit of fun. He's a knight.
Yeah.
He went into battle a few times, you know. So probably those are the three that, off the top of my head, I can think of.
It's your gold, silver and bronze.
Yeah, a little bit. But the Ninth Earl's he's just fascinating.
Yeah. And what you've done there is kind of covered a lot of the scope of the castle's history.
Yes.
Harry Hotspur, big medieval guy.
Mm-hmm.
But the castle's not just medieval.
Nope.
The Wizard Earl is a Tudor who goes into the Stuart period. And then the first Duchess covers a lot of the Georgian era in the 1700s. And they're all using the castle in totally different ways.
Yeah. So those three probably are the most interesting. And since we've done podcasts on all of them, if you want to know a bit more, just go back through the collection.
Head on back into the archive.
Yeah. Next question.
Okay.
Where is the castle's Great Hall?
Well, this kind of goes back to a question a lot of people ask when they're here and they're looking for Harry Potter filming locations. Alnwick Castle doesn't have a Great Hall anymore. You mentioned the dining room before, which has the best ceiling.
It does.
If Alnwick had a hall in the medieval period that it's as close to a Great Hall as you're likely to get, we'd probably call it a baronial hall.
Yeah.
And that's where the big decisions happened. That's roughly where the site of the current dining room is. Not quite, different size, different shape, different building, but you're generally in the same area. Yeah,
it's where we normally sort of explain it.
Yes.
On tours, just because it's the easiest to understand the difference almost. It's a big space. You've got the state dining room as is now, but you can understand how it could have been used as a space
back then,
500 years ago.
Yeah. But it's not used as that anymore.
Nope.
Because the first Duchess and her husband, again, they're turning that into dining rooms. The fourth Duke of Northumberland in the Victorian period reaffirms that, and the state dining room ends up on that side of the castle. There's no trace of a Great Hall as it was anymore.
No.
At the same time, he does build the guest hall in the castle courtyard, which looks like you would imagine a Great Hall to be. But that is only 150, 160 years old. And it was designed for big functions and big events and feasts and dinners, but in a much more modern way than you'd expect from a castle.
Yes. And again, looking at the archives that we have sort of in the last couple of months, is they were used for big parties, essentially. You had many, many tables put in, going right through into the courtyard itself sometimes.
Yes.
But it was very much for big dinners, big functions, big parties.
Yeah. So not really a Great Hall to speak of. Some huge rooms. The dining room is impressive. It is a massive room. The ceiling is unpainted like a Great Hall's would have been 500-600 years ago. But if you're looking for a traditional medieval hall with big long trestle tables, we don't have one anymore.
We don't. No.
Not for a couple of centuries anymore.
So again, a bit of a not quite answer.
I think that's a little bit more definitive. We've
What
got
about-
one more question.
What
to go
about
in.
this one, though? So the final question is probably, again, one that doesn't quite have an answer to it, is why does the Percy lion have a straight tail?
Yeah, this is going to be vague.
Yeah.
So the Percy lion you will see on the Lion Bridge if you're approaching the castle over the land we call the pastures and up the hill to where the Barbican, the medieval entrance is. And he stands there on all 4 feet with a tail sticking out straight behind him.
Yeah.
If you go to Scion House, which we've done a couple of episodes about as well, you'll see a Percy lion on the top of Scion with a straight tail as well. We call him the Percy lion, and he is a little bit different to most other lions you would see in heraldry, in flags, and other decorations like that. But why? I've seen several answers. None of them are definitive.
No.
So I'll give you a couple of options you can just pick.
Mm-hmm.
Story number one is that Lord Percy, going back to the 1300s, knew that King Edward III was a huge fan of lions, had lots of them in his menagerie at the Tower of London, which we talked about a little bit in our podcast with Tracy Borman a couple of episodes ago. Lord Percy wanted to get the approval of the king but didn't want to copy him, so adopted a lion as his symbol but made it different.
Yeah.
I don't think that one's true because the Percys already had a lion as part of their heraldry that is a lot more similar to the royal lion.
Yes.
And they didn't get rid of that.
No.
I've heard one that Lord Percy saw a drawing by Michelangelo, him again, of a lion with a straight tail, thought it was really good, copied it, and used it. But without having seen that drawing by Michelangelo, I'm not so sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Percy lion is a little bit more recent for his straight tail, and it's been done to make him stand out from other lions, but not for a medieval chivalry, heraldry kind of reason. He's just, like the statues on top of the castle, done it for the look a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a lot more boring, but it's a lot more likely to be true.
Yes. Yeah. And it's one of those, again, stories where we like to tell all of the different versions and then you can pick your favourite.
Yeah. The boring but more likely to be true one.
Yeah. Is
It's
usually
probably,
the
it's probably what we go with all of these ones.
Yeah.
But it's another question without one clear answer,
Mm-hmm.
which always tends to be the case with history.
Mm-hmm.
We only know what we know until somebody discovers something else.
Yeah. And a lot of the time they weren't writing down why they were doing things. They just did things.
Yeah. So we have drawings, we have plans of
Yeah.
lions with straight tails. We know that they were using it by the 1750s because there are paintings of Northumberland House in London with a Percy lion with a straight tail on there.
Yeah.
So you can trace it back and see how far it's gone, but nobody really at that original point went, I've done this because.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
That we know of.
That
we
we
never
know of.
There might be something in the archives that eventually is found.
yeah, next book you look at in the library could have it in there. So I think that probably brings us to the end of our questions.
Yeah.
Not as clear yes or no answers,
No.
but hopefully interesting answers anyway.
Yes. So we hope that you've enjoyed hearing some of the answers to your questions, and we might just do something similar in the future if you like it.
Yeah, episode 100.
If we get there.
If we get there.
Thank you to everybody who thought about sending a question in for this episode, and thank you very much to everyone who listened to this podcast. Whether this was your first or you've heard all 50 episodes, we're very grateful for you.
And we mentioned a lot of the episodes that we've done in the past, the previous 49 episodes, throughout the course of answering these questions. So do go back and listen to any of those if you want to hear them again or for the first time. This is the last episode of the Alnwick Castle Podcast for 2023. We'll be taking a break over Christmas, but we'll be back in January for episode 51, which, as we mentioned, will be about the soldiers kept prisoner at the castle after the Battle of Dunbar in 1650.
We hope you will join us again in 2024, but until then, I've been Deborah.
And I've been Daniel.
Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.
Bye.